The Undertaker is one of two new Nightfarers that have released with this Elden Ring Nightreign DLC, and both characters are extremely exceptional in their own right. Both are very versatile, but for today we are just going to talk about the Undertaker and how well she performs in both solo and in teams. And no, I'm not going to talk about Deep of Night whatsoever in this video. I'll talk about that at a later date because yeah, Deep of Night is a completely different animal. But to first start off with, we are going to talk about her stats. Definitely one of the strongest parts about the character. Decent bulk, not the worst FP or stamina, but very good damaging stats and an A scaling in strength and faith. Unfortunately, her dexterity stat is extremely low, and most weapons in this game at least come with somewhat of a dexterity scaling. So there is a lot of potential damage that she is missing out on. Because just for an example, there is a relic out there that she has that lowers her faith and increases her dexterity. And in fact, this relic lets her get more damage with strength faith-based weapons like the Marika's Hammer or the Envoy's Horn, which are weapons that she's likely to find, being that she is likely to come across hammers. So if you are predominantly using weapons, that would be a relic that I do recommend. However, her having such a good faith scaling means that she can have amazing synergy with spells. You can very well just play her like a hybrid-based character, go to locations that spawn in seals, and you can just use these spells at the start of a fight, and then end up switching back to your melee options, because spells do typically hit harder. Now, spells aren't really something that you can use throughout the majority of the fight, because she does have very poor amounts of FP, but if you did want to play her as a pure caster, you definitely can, because there is another relic out there that increases her mind and her faith. And this particular relic actually gives her more faith and more damage than characters like the Recluse and the Revenant when using incantations. Doesn't matter what type of incantations that you use, I just made a build recently talking about the physical damaging incantations and how great a synergy she has with those, but her stats are definitely very forgiving. And even when it comes to stats that she kind of lacks in, like dexterity, FP, or even stamina, she actually has the tools out there to help compensate these downsides. Now, I did already touch on her being likely to find hammers, so I might as well talk about her hammer moveset. Now, typically hammers aren't going to output that high of DPS, nor really have that much range, but hammers always end up having really good stance damage, especially with those charged heavy attacks that are actually just as fast, if not faster than some like dexterity weapon charged heavy attacks. And they can be some of the best stance breaking weapons in the entire game, right behind the fist weapons. In terms of the hammer power stancing moveset, I think it's completely terrible. It's just way too slow, awful DPS, and really risky to use. Unless you're going to be spamming jumping attacks the entire time, I kind of would stay away from this. And just stick to one-handing or two-handing, because you're typically going to get more stance damage, and it's going to be more stamina friendly. Now, when it comes to the Undertaker's unique hammer moveset, unfortunately, it is going to be a little bit slower. For both the light attacks and the heavy attacks, that is not going to be as fast. Now, it's not really that noticeable, but it still is going to be a downside. However, there is going to be one decent positive to her moveset, and that it does lunge in very far. Like all of her attacks, one-handed or two-handed, that is get a bit better lunge than the average hammer moveset. Now, another small difference that her moveset has is that the light attacks only last 4 hits compared to the average hammer moveset lasting 5, which actually is pretty important because there are some character relics out there for her that allow her to get more damage when she hits with a final light attack. So overall, her hammer moveset is okay, and her being likely to find hammers is still perfectly fine as well because there are lots of really good options. You always can come across some nice strength faith based options, and a handful of bleed options too, which is obviously always nice to have in an expedition. Now, there are a bunch of other weapons outside of hammers that I obviously would like to run with her. Anything that's basically strength faith related, which pretty much means almost every single great hammer. There's a handful of colossal weapons too, but I don't typically care to run larger weapons with her because her stamina is so low, and large weapons consume a lot of stamina. So if I did want to play with large weapons and use like those power sensing types of builds, I'd honestly rather play with the Raider when it came to that particular build, because the stamina is more forgiving with him, although her character skill does have some nice synergy to counteract this. But speaking of her character skill named Trance, this is an activation based skill that doesn't necessarily require an animation. You can use this at any point, and it does start an 8-second buff, and this buff does many things. It fully regenerates your stamina, it gives you faster movement speed, a unique dodge, you get a damage boost, you get more damage with consecutive attacks, you get more poise, and you get more damage negation. And there also is a secondary skill that she has that combines with her ultimate, but I'll talk about that in a little bit because first we might as well break down every single one of these perks. Starting off with the stamina refresh, this is just so good in having her be more aggressive because it pretty much like just doubles her stamina bar. So when I play this character, I just keep spamming attacks, and then when I run out of stamina, I just pop my skill, get my entire stamina bar back, and then just continuously spam. Now when it does come to the unique dodge that she gets in this skill, it turns her from like a really good light roll into this nice dashing attack that is a lot more snappy. It might take a bit of getting used to when you're going back and forth, but this dodge is definitely an upgrade when it comes to just being able to spam it and not really get hit that often. Now when it comes to the movement increase for this character skill, it pretty much just turns her jog into a sprint, which means that she can move really quickly without having to consume any stamina. So she can create distance, close in the gap, strafe attacks a lot easier than you otherwise normally would. Now, unfortunately, you are very prone to pivoting when doing this, which if you don't know what pivoting is when you start sprinting and do a 180, it just does this dumb animation that has you get stuck and be very vulnerable. It has gotten me hit a whole bunch of times, and yes, you can counteract this by blocking, but it still is very annoying. When it comes to the damage boost of the skill, it is a 10% damage boost, and that is going to be to all sources. So that means spells, weapon skills, a random throwing pot, doesn't matter what it is. And yes, that even includes her ultimate attack as well. And you can actually have this 10% buff be increased to over 20% with consecutive attacks, which depending on the weapon and depending on the attack, will be dependent on how quickly you can actually gain this secondary buff. Now, unfortunately, the buff is just going to go away after the 10 seconds, and by the time that you actually gain this secondary buff, the time is basically already finished. But it still is just free damage, so I'm not going to complain. And then on top of all this broken stuff, she also gets more poise and damage negation to just further incentivize her just being an absolute maniac and just being super aggressive. The insane amounts of poise that she gets just helps her tank so many different types of enemies. You can just keep walking around enemies and just like poise backstabbing everything like it's Dark Souls 1. And it also allows her to be like a more aggressive spellcaster too, because you won't get staggered out of every single incantation, which is fantastic because incantations typically don't have much maneuverability as well. Now, she's not going to be able to tank attacks of a lot of larger bosses and some larger Night Lord bosses, but for most of the expedition, it definitely is very helpful. And then the extra bit of damage negation is just like way too over the top. Like she has closer to 30% damage negation throughout this skill. They basically gave this skill everything. But it just makes the skill super fun to play with because you can just keep spamming over and over again, and it just rewards you for being so aggressive. You can also end the buff early if you wanted to start the cooldown earlier, but it's not going to make the cooldown go any faster if you do end it early, so do keep that in mind. Now, as I mentioned, there is a secondary portion to this character skill that happens when you do fully charge it, or if you click triangle and L2 and R2 at the exact same time, and it pretty much just offers a beefed up version of this character skill. It does all the exact same things, but it just lasts almost twice as long. It's now 15 seconds, which obviously is fantastic. It also means you have more time to take advantage of the consecutive attacks buff. But on top of all that, it also gives you automatic dodging. And it quite literally means that any single time that you're gonna get hit, the game just like automatically dodges for you. Like it cancels you out of animations and just dodges for you. But the trade-off for this is that it does consume your ultimate attack. So you do have to have your ultimate art gauge filled up, and then when you do use the skill fully charged, it will remove the ultimate as well as remove the character skill. Now I'm sure everybody can think of some use cases to be able to just benefit of infinite dodging. Any single time that you do go up against enemies that have like these super complex boss combos, or like super annoying attacks to dodge that you don't really know how to, you can just quickly panic pop this skill, and then just like completely avoid it while also just gaining the benefits of the amazing character skill for just almost twice as long. Now the thing is, your ultimate attack kind of can already do things like that to begin with. Like the ultimate attack already gives you lots of iframes, meaning that you can just quickly panic pop that to counteract a really annoying boss combo or boss attack that you don't know how to dodge. It is also going to stagger enemies out of this attack as well, so you can just completely negate it. And it also is going to proc the passive effect of other Undertakers on your team, unlike the fully charged character skill, which I will get into more of that later. But there are definitely going to be some use cases that I have thought of that make this thing be very good. One is going to be if you do try to revive your allies, if you're like the last person alive, being that her ultimate ability doesn't really revive very well, you can very well just turn on automatic dodging, just focus on your allies, and then just keep spamming away to revive them. It's kind of like Duchess's ability to turn invisible, but it literally makes you invulnerable instead of just invisible. So arguably it's even better than that. Also, if you are getting ganked by a whole bunch of enemies, you can quickly just like pop this and then like just spam your way out of attacks. It could be extremely good against someone like Everdark Libra when you really need to be able to get like some good damage in, and all these NPCs are surrounding you at once. So there definitely is going to be some nice use case, and I'm glad that this skill does exist. But at least in this game mode, there aren't too many circumstances where I would like to use this skill over this using the ultimate. Also, because her ultimate attack doesn't even fully drain her ultimate. It actually leaves her with 25% ultimate charge left, whereas the character skill completely drains it. But might as well get into her ultimate attack itself, named Loathsome Hex. This is a very high damaging ultimate attack that practically never misses because your character turns into a tracking missile and is like lunges towards the enemy and just does insane damage. This actually is the second hardest hitting ultimate attack in the entire game, and you can actually further improve the damage with things, as I mentioned earlier, like using the character skill or using that specific relic. But there really isn't too much to say about this ultimate attack. It's just very easy to use and does decent damage. You basically just lock onto an enemy and it just tracks straight towards them and explodes. Unfortunately, you don't really have much directional control, and even though you can go through enemies, you don't really have the choice to bypass the enemy that you have locked onto. But something that you can do to overcome this is lock onto an enemy and line up somebody else in front of you, and it's going to bypass that enemy, still damage them, and then damage the target behind them. So in terms of getting maximum value out of your ultimate attack, this is something that I would try to look out for. But yeah, this ultimate attack can get very close damage to someone like the Wilder, but you basically just never miss. And it also saves on ultimate charge as well. You always end up with 25% of your ultimate charge left, which is just insane. Now, the only downside that I can say about this ultimate attack is that you can't really free aim it that well, and it's awful at reviving your allies. It only ends up doing 1 bar worth of revive damage, and there's still plenty of times that I try to revive my teammate with this and it straight up just whiffed. But as I mentioned earlier, with the fully charged character skill that grants infinite iframes, you could just use that ultimate instead when it comes to clutching up a revive, because you can practically just never die while trying to hit your teammates. But what makes this ultimate be even funnier is her passive ability, Confluence. We have just established that her ultimate attack is already one of the best in the entire game due to its ease of use and damage. And for some reason, From Software saw this ultimate attack being as good as it is, and then decided to have her passive ability grant her a free ultimate attack any single time that somebody on your team uses one. And the only catch is that you have to be somewhat close to your teammates and that you only have a few seconds to be able to get this off. But it doesn't even interfere with your main ultimate regen rate. So it's not like it consumes your own ultimate or just gives you ultimate charge. No, it's just a free ultimate attack. And you can have multiple Undertakers on your team just chaining it back and forth. And it's the most stupidest thing in the entire game, but it's hilarious every single time that it happens. So you can put this character in the hands of a complete trash can and they can still end up getting some decent damage. Even if you somehow build around the Undertaker incorrectly, even though she has amazing stats and a great character skill, and all the tools to be able to get some decent damage and be a good teammate, as long as you know how to click the ultimate attack button, you're going to be perfectly fine. Now, yes, this specific ability isn't going to be as useful in solo, because obviously there's no teammates there, but From Software still added a secondary effect to this passive ability. For when you dodge grab attacks, it just grants you this exact same effect and a free ultimate attack. And I'm pretty sure this was put in place purely just for the solo players, but it actually works in teams as well. But the grab attacks aren't going to be as good in teams because the boss can end up aggroing towards your teammate and not you. So it kind of balances out a little bit. But yeah, this passive ability is definitely a lot better in teams. But that is not to say the character is bad in solo by any means, because her synergy with hammers, being able to trade out with enemies, and just being able to get good stance damage is a lot more valuable in solo play than it is in team-based play. Now, when it does come to her character-specific relics, I did already talk about the stat-changing ones, which they are mainly for Deep of Night, but you can guarantee to get them in the base game as well if you do beat the DLC and go to the collector signboard. But I will just go over them again. The Dexterity Relic is honestly going to be one of her best relics to run if you don't really care to use spells with the Undertaker, because it just allows her to have a lot more damage with these quality-based weapons. Like for instance, if you wanted to use fist weapons with the Undertaker, this Dexterity Relic will offer her 15% more damage with those. And even if you did want to stick with your hammers, this relic is actually going to get you more damage with those weapons too, even if you include the Envoy's Horn and the Maracas Hammer that actually have faith scalings. Because yeah, this relic also does decrease her faith. Now the relic also does decrease her vigor, but it's only by -2, which is 40 HP. And when it comes to the Mind and Faith relic, This is if you want to turn her into like a pure spell character and benefit of things like poise casting with her character skill. I did actually make a build video around this relic, and she definitely can be one of the best spellcasters in the entire game. The only downside is that she has a very low dexterity and is not going to benefit off that fast spellcasting speed, but so do a lot of other spellcasters in this game, and you can just find those as weapon passives anyway. But when it does come to the most important character-specific relic, in my opinion, it's going to be activating ultimate art increases attack power. This gives your character pretty much a 15% damage boost for 40 seconds when using your ultimate attack. Now, it's just going to be for when you use your ultimate attack, not like the fully charged character skill that also drains your ult. That is not going to work with this. But being that this relic works on activation, it inherently means that you have 15% more damage to your ultimate too. And if you must know, yes, it also does work with your passive ability. So when you do have that free ultimate attack, it also works there too. So in trios, you can almost always have that 40% damage boost in the middle of a boss fight because people are always spamming their ultimate attacks. The next most important relic, in my opinion, this one's mainly going to be for team-based play, but the attack power increased by landing the final blow of an attack chain. This does grant roughly a 12% damage increase for 20 seconds. And this effect will proc any single time that you do land the last light attack in your combo. And the reason why I say this is better for team-based play is because other allies can be distracting the boss while you just keep continuously spamming your attacks. Because in solo, when the bosses are always aggroed towards you, there's a very little chance that you end up getting to your final light attack. And also, when you are playing in solos, I would much rather just spam charged heavy attacks with these strength-based weapons like hammers or fists. So you can actually benefit of doing that more stance damage, where that might not be as useful in teams where enemies already have lots of poise. The relic physical attacks boosted while assists effect from incantation is active for self is a whole bunch of just like word vomit. But basically what it means is that any single time that you use a incantation buff, so any single weapon buff, healing spell, body buff, aura buff, doesn't matter what it is, every single one is going to grant a 15% damage boost for 60 seconds. Now, no, they do not stack at all, but it still is going to offer you a very nice benefit. And when you are playing the Undertaker, you kind of do want to go out of your way and try and find some seals. And this is honestly a genius designed relic, because one of the downsides of the incantation playstyle is that so many seals that you find always have a bunch of just like terrible support based spells. But with this relic, you actually want to be able to find these terrible support based spells because at least you can benefit off them. Now, do keep in mind, this is just going to be for physical attacks. So if you do have like these split damaging weapons, or if you do plan to use like elemental based spells, this is not going to be as useful. But this relic is why I do believe that she performs best as a physical spell based character. Now, in terms of her weakest character specific relic, contact with allies restores HP while ultimate art is activated. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's very hard to aim with this ultimate attack, much less trying to hit something as skinny as your allies. And the AoE of this attack doesn't really go that far either. So even if you do have your teammates like stand right next to the boss so you can hit both at once, it's still probably not ever going to work out that way. And by the very off chance that you do manage to hit your teammate, it's only going to heal for 30% of their health. There is another character relic out there, but that one is just for Deep of Night, and I'll talk about that one in my Deep of Night video. But in terms of some like non-character specific relics to run on the Undertaker, honestly, it really depends on your build, but things like partial HP restoration in combination with taking attacks improves attack power can be good on any character, but especially with the Undertaker. Physical attack up, more vigor. The new balances boss relic can do pretty good depending on your build. And if you have done her character remembrance, the very last remembrance relic that you get is completely broken, but this relic is also just broken on any single character that's going to be using weapons, as I will probably talk about in a separate video. Like this one perk can just offer so much more damage to your weapons. You should pretty much have this one relic on every single melee character. But the fact that it does come with an Undertaker perk just makes it best with her too. But overall thoughts is that the Undertaker is a fantastic character in both solo and in trios. Doesn't matter how you build around her, whether it be the Strength Faith hybrid build, a quality melee build, or a pure Faith caster build. She's going to be a perfectly viable character because she has very good stats and a very good set of abilities. If you are interested in seeing some builds around this character, I have made a video about one already, but I do have like 10 different builds that I have with the Undertaker that I can all combine and talk about in one video. So if that is something that you do want to see, definitely do let me know. But before that happens, I do want to talk more about the Scholar next. So definitely stay tuned for that one as well. Anyway, catch you guys around. See yous.